Hey everybody, welcome back to Truth Revealed. I'm your host, Sergio Denaro, and today we are going to look at Sarah Boone, aka the Suitcase Killer. All right, this analysis shouldn't be too controversial. We are going to look at her police interview today. They asked her a lot of really bad questions, but we were able to get a lot of very good information because she likes to talk. So even with some pretty vague and, dare I call it, amateurish questioning, we still get a ton of information. All that being said, today we are looking at Sarah Boone, the Suitcase Killer, and the way that she speaks, it's very generically normal. Now, she does have some issues, and when you see her talk, you might think there's nothing normal about the way that she talks. But what I'm saying is the way that she tells the truth and the way that she lies is very normal. It's very standard. Now, you'll see that she lies a lot, and that makes her language look crazy in a lot of places, but that's just normal deception. Okay. The interrogators are in red. Sarah's statements are in black. My statements are in purple. He had some injuries to his left shoulder. He had a cut near his lip. We could see his mouth was a little. And then Sarah jumps in here and says, I haven't laid a hand on him. I also, too, he fell off my son's bike, so I don't know. And he's notorious for running into the wall or injuring, so I. All right, so she wasn't accused of anything, and she cut them off. This speaks to knowledge of guilt. If it takes too long for somebody to respond to something that they know the answer to, then that means they're trying to create a deceptive answer. If somebody answers too quickly, it means that they've already thought of the answer and they're just waiting for that question, and they have a tendency to cut the interrogator off. Okay, this statement, it starts off with a negative. I haven't. And she says, laid a hand on him. Now, what does it mean to lay a hand on somebody? Okay, this goes back to hearing the gunshot in the kitchen. I didn't lay a hand on him. Well, we already know that she did touch him at some point during that day. When she says, I didn't lay a hand on him, that is factually incorrect. So we're not going to read into this, which the intent here is to make us read into it and believe that she didn't injure his shoulder or cut his lip. This is right out of the gate. So we're making notes on this. We're not jumping to conclusions yet, but this is a very suspect statement right out of the gate here. So I also, too, this is a fragment. She says too, then she says I, he. We have a changing pronoun here. So we got I, he fell off my son's bike. That's past tense. This means that this probably did happen, but she's well aware that it didn't result in any injuries. She's telling you something that factually happened, but is irrelevant to the statement here. You have, he fell off my son's bike. So that's an explanatory statement. I don't know. An explanatory statement that is followed by a negative statement that's highly sensitive and most likely deception. I don't know is also a reduction in commitment. She says, so I don't know. And that's a sentence fragment because it cuts off. And she says, and he's notorious for running into the wall or injuring. And she says, so I. Now, it's a little bit of a garble here. There could be another word in here. So he's notorious for running into the wall. This statement itself is meaningless. You're going to probably want to say, look, anybody who says he's notorious for running into the wall or injuring himself, I think she says injuring himself, you're going to say, she's lying. Everyone knows she's lying. Well, in this case, yes, you are correct here. But when somebody says he's notorious for running into the wall, that is not deception from the verbiage. That just sounds stupid. But this is not an indicator of deception. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to believe her, because when a statement is deceptive, it screams deception. And we have a lot of indicators to look at here. And this just adds an element of humor to a deceptive statement. So I, he is changing pronoun, which is a strong / objective indicator of deception. One thing that I do want to focus on more heavily, I have a tendency to skip over this, is when an interrogator asks a question, the first part of it, the direct answer to the question, is not an open statement. It's the answer. We want to notate where the answer itself begins and ends. There was actually no question here. So there is no answer because there's no question, which means this is just an open statement. They are explaining to her that he had injuries, and she decides to jump in. And even though you can tell she didn't rehearse the actual words that she's saying, she was prepared to deal with that question, and she wanted to cut it off as soon as possible. So what do we actually have here? I haven't laid a hand on him. The fact that she took the time to make an attempt to answer the question, but that she very specifically chose not to say that she didn't cause those wounds. Just by itself, it's a very strong indicator that those wounds are from her. Then you get a bunch of fragments here, changing pronoun, and then explanatory plus a negative. There's no doubt in my mind that the wounds came from her. We know that there's deception in there and that she's giving a very strong indicator at that point that she was involved in at least injuring him before he got into the suitcase. And then the interrogator says, so we're talking about Sunday. Okay, so yes, the interrogator caught her in a lie right here. Yes, that's great. You caught her in a lie, but this is not a question. She says, so we're talking about Sunday. Without asking a question, you're only going to get what she's going to volunteer to you. Now, if in this case, Sarah Boone basically volunteers all of the information. So you'd have to be a really shockingly bad interrogator to not be able to get the full story out of Sarah Boone here. And I will tell you that by the end of this, the interrogators did more harm than good to the case here, which it doesn't even seem possible. If they wouldn't have interrogated her, they would have had a stronger case going into court. And then she says, that's why thoroughly confused. We have a missing eye. So she's not confused about anything because we had a good time sitting on the back porch, having wine and smoking a couple of cigarettes, and then decided to go inside. So we have a missing either I or we here, which is another indicator of deception, then decided to go inside and literally paint. Okay. That literally is an unnecessary word. It's not an indicator of deception, but it's an unnecessary word. And so when we get unnecessary words in here, we want to pay attention. So literally paint, do puzzles, and play and listen to music. That's why nobody got out of sorts. Let's see here. She says nobody. Nobody got out of sorts. She doesn't say we didn't fight. We didn't have an argument. There's literally 10 different ways she could have phrased this without having to resort to overly generic terminology. So we want to notate this here. That's why nobody got out of sorts. This is what's mind-blowing to me. Like, I have no clue. Nobody laid a hand on anybody. So now it's kind of like that story, that crazy story that I was giving you. Nobody laid a hand on anybody. There's just everything is wrong with this because laid a hand does not mean hit. I just want to emphasize that it's a meaningless phrase. And because it's a meaningless phrase, it has a ton of meaning because it means that she did hit him because she has a lot of opportunity here to say that she didn't, and she can't say it. That's why thoroughly confused, because we had a good time sitting on the back porch, having wine and smoking a couple of cigarettes. This part is truthful. I just want to show that there is truthful stuff in here. We had a good time sitting on the back porch, having wine and smoking a couple of cigarettes. It is part of an over-explanation, but she does use we, and she uses past tense. Here we have a pronoun. We have past tense. We had a good time. I put that in here as a note for baseline. I want you to see that her baseline is normal. She does speak the truth like a truthful person, and she does speak deceptively the same way that a normal person does. As if something hit him, and she says, I have not touched him. I have not touched him. I have not touched him. Okay, so this tells us a few things. Now, first off, this is uncontracted. So there's no accusation here. This does work in our benefit here. Because there's no accusation, there's no reason to uncontract this. If she had been directly accused numerous times at this point, then you would see this uncontracted and the repeating of words. But there's technically no accusation. She doesn't even using the word killed or murdered. So there's literally no accusation. Even the insinuation is mild. The most that she would admit to would be to scratching him at this point. So this over angry sort of response is more in line with borderline personality than it is with somebody's natural anger building because they're not being believed when they say the truth. She triple stamps this, which is grossly overemphasizing. And they're all uncontracted. Have not is the wrong tense. This should be, actually, I didn't touch him, or I didn't hurt him, I didn't hurt him, I didn't hurt him, would be a far more truthful way of saying this. But I have not touched him. It's the wrong tense. Touched doesn't mean hit. it means touched, and touching doesn't leave marks. So just the words alone are not truthful. Repeating this phrase is not subconscious, which means this overemphasis was intentional. Repeating it 3 times is hugely problematic, especially at this point in the interview. We're still at the beginning of the interview here. And then, of course, it's uncontracted. Now, right. So what do you mean by he comes after you? Like, and she says, he gets belligerent drunk. Like, I don't know if y'all have looked through my phone yet and seen many of the pictures and videos that I have taken. And at one point, I started documenting everything. So you all will see in my pictures, bloody fingers, split forehead. He split my nose. I've got this. Subject talks about George in present tense. He gets belligerently drunk. The correct tense would be he would get belligerently drunk. So again, she's still talking about him in present tense. So at one point, and I started. So she says, I started documenting everything. Now there's missing time here. So we have to notate that. We don't have any indicator yet of what is missing, but we know there's missing time. Like, I don't know is a deception tag for her. She took the pictures for future use, not present use. Okay. This is not analysis of verbiage, but it's analysis of reality that we have to keep in mind. She says, I don't know if y'all have looked through my phone yet and seen many of the pictures and videos that I have taken. And at one point I started documenting everything. Okay. So she didn't take pictures of injuries so that she could go to the police and file a report. She says she started documenting everything, which means like she's making a documentary. This is information that she's storing for a later date. That is another strong indicator for borderline personality disorder, because part of that is wanting to be able to control your significant other, and having documented injuries is one way of doing that. The fact that this was not used for anything at that time is very problematic for her. And then she says, I've got this. I don't know where she was going with that, but I would really like to know what she's got. I got this. So let's see. Yeah, this indicates planning, which is an indicator, again, of borderline. Why are you still with him? Okay. Why are you still with him? Okay, first off, he's dead, so she's not still with him. Second, the interrogator is getting sucked into her reality. You want the subject to get sucked into your reality as the interrogator, the reality that you're creating. When you ask her, why are you still with him? And what are you getting at? Are you trying to create a defense for her? What are you doing? Where are you going with this? Anyways, she says, everybody asks me that. When I tell you guys this, I really love him like I do. And I feel like I can help him. Okay, everybody asks me this. This is a general statement. So it's possible that she's had that conversation. But if she's borderline personality, then she is creating this conversation. She will create conflict and then leave and talk to either her parents, his parents, someone like that, and talk about how bad he is to her. And then when they ask, well, why are you still with him? And she says, oh, but I really love him. She builds herself up as being the good guy and makes him look like the bad guy. We want to know, does that swing back and forth? Is he always the bad guy? Is he always the good guy? Is there one incident where that happens, or is this always swinging back and forth? And then she says, I feel like I can help him, which I did, because he came a really long way from where he was in Philadelphia to moving back to here and to dealing with everything else that he's been dealing with. We got problems here. So she says, first, we have an explanatory statement here. Then he has come a long way is present tense again. And that's problematic because he's dead. But then she switches and you're like, okay, did she finally realize he's dead? She says, he came a really long way from where he was in Philadelphia. She starts out by talking about how she helped him, like he's come emotionally a really long way. And then she switches to the right tense and then switches it to an actual geographic location as well. So she is not saying that he came a really long way emotionally. She's saying that he has come and then she switches it to Philadelphia, to moving back to here and to dealing with everything. Another generic word, everything else he's been dealing with. I've really helped him. I bailed him out of jail, 3 times? I've gone to every single hearing and every single arraignment. Everything that I did for him. Okay, she said numerous times, I really helped him. She says everything that I did for him, because she's not defining it, it doesn't mean anything. She says, I bailed him out of jail, went to every single arraignment that I did for him, gone to see all his public defenders. I've gone to the state. I did everything for him. Everything. So I did everything for him, but she's only talking about being there during his legal trouble. So she creates his legal troubles and then she's there for him. Another classic indicator of borderline. Because I'm trying to help him. And then this is unintelligible. I don't know what she said here. And he was trying, really trying. And then he starts to think about things and I think he gets overwhelmed. And then it's like the next thing I know, he's drinking. Okay, interesting. He starts. So we have missing time here. We have two explanatory statements and starts to think about things. Okay, why is there missing time? Because she could have easily said this without the starts. He was really trying. He's really trying. He starts to think about things. Okay, so what is he leaving out? If she says he's really trying, but he sits down and he thinks about things, okay, without the start in there, that tells you a story. He sits down, he thinks about things, he gets lost in his own world, he falls into this depression. Like there's a storyline that she's insinuating that she's not saying. Instead, something starts. So what starts? And oftentimes when you see the word starts, there's some sort of violence, some sort of conflict starts. And it's like the next thing I know, he's drinking. Okay. So it's like, oh man, I know where this is going to go. Again, she's insinuating. She says, I know where this is going to go. That doesn't actually tell you anything. So don't insinuate anything here. So I'm going to go upstairs and read a book, or I'm going to go for a bike ride, or I'm going to do something. Okay. So now she's talking in very generic hypotheticals, something else and then she says, I don't want to drink. It's a negative statement. This is sensitive to her. I don't want to drink. Then she says, the occasional wine, whatever. She's actually double stamping it. The overemphasis is a deception tag for her. Then she says, well, the occasional wine, whatever. Like, that's okay. Then she goes on to say, or if it's a weekend, that's when you have a good time. So she's saying, I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink unless it's during the week, and then some wine or whatever means some wine or anything else. And then she says on the weekend, that's when you have a good time and get trashed. So what does I don't want to drink mean? It means she's trying to set that up as information that she wants you to have for something else, because it's not true. This is a lie, that I don't want to drink. Why is she lying about this? That's what we want to figure out here. You don't have to wake up the next day. Okay, that's a negative statement in conjunction with the drinking and the I don't want to drink, because over the weekend you don't have to wake up the next day and do things. I have to tend to Lucas. I have to take him to school. I guess what she's insinuating is she doesn't want to get so trashed that she can't get up the next morning during the week. Okay, I have to take him to school. I had all this stuff to do. He doesn't know how to, I guess, maintain himself. And it's unclear here whether she's talking about Lucas or George. Her son is Lucas, where I can do 50 things at once and still know the 50 things more previously prior that I need to get done. Now, again, she's really talking herself up. There's an element of narcissism with her too. He can't process like that. He didn't process like that. It's still possible that she could be talking about Lucas, but this seems to be referring back to him thinking about things and getting overwhelmed. So it looks like when she says he doesn't know how to, I guess, maintain himself, I think she has jumped back to George here. He didn't process like that. So we got a bunch of negative statements in here. And then we have an explanatory. Now we have he didn't process like that. He can't process like that. So he would literally, not literally, but had smoke coming out his ears. We have a negative followed by an explanatory statement here. That's problematic. Now we have a strong indicator of deception here. So now we have another explanatory statement. The next thing you know, he doesn't want to deal with it. I'm going to go get something to drink. Okay, this is one of the most key parts of this. This is why we focus so heavily on what people actually say. She says, so the next thing you know, he doesn't want to deal with it. Then she says, I'm going to go get something to drink. While she's insinuating that that's what he says, that's not what she says. She is the person that I refers to. She says, I'm going to go get something to drink. So the majority of the time, I would hang out outside or do something else because I don't want to drink. Now we have an explanatory plus a negative, because I don't want to drink. That is way too direct here. This is definitely deceptive. We have a bunch of indicators. So we got negative statements, negative statements, negative statement. We got explanatory, negative there. Then we got, see how they're all coming together here? And then it culminates in because I don't want to drink. Now, she doesn't want to drink, but he starts drinking and then he gets out of control. And she says, I'm going to go get something to drink. What this paragraph has told me is that when he comes home and he has a lot of stuff on his mind and he's trying to process it, that she begins to drink in order to get him to drink. And then once they're both drinking, that gives her an element of control. Now she can do what she wants to do. She can get him out of control. She can make him violent and do things to her so she can record it for her documentary and whatnot. And every time his job broke his heart, and it made me sad because he had so much pride in his job, and the store that he took care of so much totally went downhill, and that broke his heart because he had put so much work and effort into fixing it up, and his manager was awful and basically gave up on all the employees. So I think that had a huge bearing on why he would drink so much. Well, she's just told us why. It had a bearing, but the reason why he drank so much is because he would have a tough time at work, and then she would start drinking. Then she says, his ex-wife is bonkers. She was all over him all the time. Send me money, send me money, send me money. How can I send you money when I don't have a job? And he's still trying to take care of me and Lucas by paying a bill here or there, getting some groceries. All right, so now we have that flipping back and forth. He's a really good guy. Oh, he beats me. Oh, he's a really good guy. He's trying to help me and Lucas by paying bills and getting groceries. So he always had something on his mind, which is why, again, I got the puzzles and the paint to try to get him off of it so we don't have a drink or he doesn't have a drink. All right, this again now is an explanatory statement plus a negative statement talking about drinking. That's deceptive. We have this again here. So when you all see my phone, you can see all of the damage he has done to me and the videos of him smashing my television because he's belligerently drunk, where most of the time I just don't want to be there. And I try to help him. I try to calm him down. Eventually, he just pops out. All right. At this point, it's pretty clear that she has borderline personality, and she is trying to present an image that she doesn't like to drink, but then she accidentally sort of explains to you that she gets trashed on the weekends and still drinks to the point of not getting totally trashed during the week, which means her not wanting to drink is a total lie. And that she drinks when he has a bad day and gets him drunk and then documents the stuff that happens after that. Okay, that's what we know so far. This is why you have to let people talk. You see this? They finally didn't interrupt. And the question was, then why are you still with him? She wants to tell you. She wants to give the whole story here. You just have to let her say it. Just let her get the story out. Any small question is going to allow her to start talking, which is all you need. Subject uses everybody, everything, something, anybody, nobody, when she is fabricating and can't come up with a detail fast enough. This is a signal of deception. So we see that here. I'm going to do something and going to state I did everything for him. This is when she's trying to present a story to you and it's just too many details, so she glosses over details. This statement is generally filled with negative and explanatory statements, which means this is deception. Because I don't want to drink, we identified that. So he doesn't want to deal with it. I'm going to get something to drink. She says, I'm going to get something to drink, so we don't have to drink because he's drunk. So all of these are explanatory statements with drinking, explanatory, drinking, explanatory, I'm going to get something to drink, drinking, all explanatory plus negatives because I don't want to drink. So there's 4 indicators in there. Okay, what we've learned so far. Subject definitely has BPD. She has her own reality. He is still alive in her reality, and she still uses present tense. She makes him dependent on her by getting him drunk and then always bailing him out. She controls him by getting him drunk, either injuring herself or antagonizing him into injuring her, and then documenting it as leverage. Remember, she doesn't document it for the moment. If your significant other in a domestic violence incident, in that moment, beats you up, and then you take pictures of it, call the police, and the police come and you give them the pictures, That's good. That's what you should do. But that's not what she's doing. She's documenting them all and keeping them for herself. That shows motive and planning for something. That's not her as a victim. That's her as somebody who is actually the one that's in control of the situation here. It's just important to understand that. She portrays herself publicly as the savior. She calls herself smart, put together. She advertises that she is the victim. You don't know her personality ahead of time. It just makes everything more difficult. In my opinion, she has borderline personality disorder, BPD. Why do I say that? Well, let's look at the definition of borderline personality, and then we'll discuss how that affects what she says. Borderline personality disorder is a mental health condition characterized by pervasive instability in moods, behaviors, self-image, and interpersonal relationships. People with BPD often experience intense emotions, have difficulty regulating those emotions, and engage in impulsive behaviors. They may also struggle with feelings of emptiness, fear of abandonment, and have a history of unstable or tumultuous relationships. Okay, now, some key features. These are the list of, let's call them symptoms. So emotional instability, like rapid mood swings, often triggered by perceived rejection or abandonment. That's important. Any perceived, and it doesn't have to be real. That's a very, very important note for borderline personalities, is it doesn't have to be real. It only has to be perceived. And borderlines have a tendency to misperceive reality. Keeping that in mind, rejection or abandonment is going to cause rapid mood swings. Okay. Fear of abandonment, extreme efforts to avoid real or imagined separation from others. Knowing that emotional instability can be triggered by abandonment and that BPDs have fear of abandonment, it's important to remember that. The triggers here that I have in bold are ones that you're going to see very clearly in the statement today. These 5 that you see here are just the 5 that you see in this interview. And then there's impulsive behavior, actions like reckless driving, substance abuse, binge eating, or spending sprees. These are just examples. These are not all inclusive. You should start to be seeing a common trend here. People with borderline have a fear of abandonment, which leads to emotional instability and impulsive behavior. They also have intense, unstable relationships that swing between idealizing and devaluing the other person. So difficulty controlling anger, intense and sometimes inappropriate expressions of anger. It's important to notice how all of these symptoms act together. They're not independent symptoms. A borderline personality has fear of abandonment. There's extreme efforts to avoid real or imagined separation. They often fantasize about somebody cheating on them. Any sort of a conversation or any sort of interaction with a person of the opposite sex will lead a borderline personality to trigger this fear of abandonment. And then you have emotional instability, rapid mood swings, often triggered by perceived rejection or abandonment. So now you have mood swings, difficulty controlling anger, intense and sometimes inappropriate expressions of anger. And quite often you see attempted murder. You see actions in here that they call like reckless driving. You'll see reckless driving, but it's when their spouse and their kid are in the car with them. Or situations like that. They'll try to drive off a cliff or try and drive into traffic. It's this wild, uncontrollable emotion that leads them to take extreme illogical action. And that is your typical borderline personality. Now, obviously, I've told you this before, I'm not a psychologist, but there's a lot of psychology that goes into interrogation. And so understanding and noticing mental health conditions is important for an interrogator. I have to be able to understand what sets people off. I have to be able to either push those buttons or not push those buttons.